All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are recording this presentation, so if you don't want to be on camera, you're definitely welcome to turn off your camera. And for those of you watching this after the fact, you will have all of our emails at the end of this presentation as well, and you're welcome to reach out if you have any follow-up questions. So next slide. So my name is Joe Tulin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Justicia y Equidad Fund grant manager here at Green Latinos. And I will pass it over to Caesar to introduce himself.
Everyone, my name is Caesar. I am a grant coordinator, and I'll be helping you with your budgets and financial assessments.
And I also want to call out the rest of the USDA team here at Green Latinos, who is also on the call today. So Rich Navas is our USDA program director. And then we have Eric St. Pierre and Molly Haas, who are our urban forestry case managers, who are also on today. If you could go to the next slide. So we have a quick little icebreaker for those of you who are here. We're getting towards the end of summer, if you don't consider summer already over. And so if you just want to drop in the chat, what is your favorite fall activity? I think for me, I love getting together with friends and having like a bonfire outside, roasting marshmallows. I see fall tree hikes. I love that. Carving pumpkins, decor, college football, and sweater weather. Wearing shirts with a hoodie anywhere outdoors. Pumpkin patch with the kids. I definitely am guilty of wearing shorts with a hoodie in the fall as well. All right, we can go to the next slide. So for those of you joining today, the purpose of this presentation is to get folks associated with managing grants for the federal funding for the USDA program we're managing here. And then kind of walking through our online template where people will be submitting their budgets for us. We also will have a presentation on Monday that goes over the general introduction of the program and some more in-depth pieces there as well. So for this particular training, we really are focused on budgets, some gap funding if folks need that as well, or bridge funding, getting folks associated with these pieces. So you can see on here our agenda. We're going to work on some budget tips. We'll do direct and indirect guidance, uploading your spreadsheet into the grant making portal. We'll talk really briefly about reimbursements. And then we're very lucky to have Adrian here from Raza Development Fund, who will talk about ways that they can help support if there's additional funding that's needed to help bridge until the reimbursements come in. So we'll get to that at the end of this presentation. Next slide. So just a couple of budget tips as folks are getting started planning their budgets for our projects that we have. One of the first things that we always recommend is to make sure that whatever your budget is that gets put into the budget form, it matches whatever is in the grant narrative and scope of work. It's really good to double check those numbers as you're getting ready to apply to our programs so that there's no discrepancies as we're going into review. For budgets, you do have to follow the Code of Federal Regulations, which is called a CFR for short. What we've done in this presentation is that we've uplifted a lot of the sections listed in the CFR for any of our potential applicants. And we'll send out a PDF of this presentation as well that will have clickable links to the CFR. That way, if folks have any questions, they can go directly to the link. And then Caesar and I are both here to help as well if folks have questions. We know that the CFR can be confusing sometimes, and we're here to help make it as easy as possible to understand. When you're planning for your budget, ask for what you need. We want you to be realistic with the cost that it takes to do tree planting, community engagement, workforce development, all of that. I think that a lot of times nonprofit organizations are used to just asking for a little bit, and we're encouraging you to ask for as much as you need to get this work done, because it is important that we're able to fund these full projects and see them to completion. The great part about this program is that folks will have 3 years to implement the project, which a lot of grants are shorter, maybe a year or two, but there's 3 years here that you can ask for funding for. We're going to share a budget spreadsheet template on this call as well. We encourage folks to start with that budget spreadsheet template because once you get into the online form, it will be really nice to have the background of all the information that needs to be uploaded before you get to it. And so we will make sure that we take some time to show the spreadsheet template and that you feel familiar with it as well. For this particular award, just a reminder that all receipts, invoices, and backup documentation must be kept for 3 years after the close of the award. So we want to be very transparent from the start. There is going to be a lot of record keeping that can be involved with this, and we want to make sure that you're set up for success. And then the last thing is that during the period of this award, if you are selected for funding, you will have to keep an active SAM.gov registration for the duration of the award. Green Latinos has recently done that to manage this award. And if anybody hasn't navigated that system before, you're also always welcome to reach out to myself or Caesar, and we can walk you through that process. Next slide. So we're going to go through a little bit of guidance here on some common budget terms and what they mean. So we're going to start with direct costs. Next slide. So direct costs really are anything that can be specifically identified for a particular project. I'll go into examples here in just a second, but basically these are things that you can really easily say this is what goes into this project. Next slide. So examples of direct costs are things like compensation or salary for the employees that are going to be working on this project, what the fringe benefits are for those particular employees that are going to be working on this project. Travel is another example of a direct cost, and there are some particular guidelines about travel that have to be followed for federal awards, and I'll go into that shortly. Any supplies that are needed, so supplies could be things like the trees themselves, irrigation supplies, tree stakes, anything like that that might be needed to plan and implement the projects. Next slide. As well as contractual costs. So a couple of examples here are things like advertising. If you have somebody coming in to help you advertise the work that's happening, if you have a public relations firm or maybe community engagement person who's doing that work, maybe you're hiring a contractor to actually do the tree planting. All of those things fall under the contractual cost example here. There are some particular requirements that go along with advertising and public relations. And so again, we've linked to the CFR here if you have questions about that. And then there is an other category for direct costs. The other category is really any direct cost that doesn't really well fit into what we've already explained. So a couple of examples of other might be costs to attend conferences. So maybe there's a registration fee to attend an urban tree planting conference. Or if there's a technology or subscription cost, maybe you're working with an entity that is funding a map to map all of your trees, and there might be a subscription cost. That could be covered under the other category as well. Next slide. And then you have indirect cost. And so most folks have probably seen that for federal awards, there is indirect costs that you can claim. If you can go to the next slide. So indirect costs are anything that isn't already identified. Examples of indirect might be general administration or general expenses for your organization. If you own a building, depreciation of building or equipment, the cost to operate and maintain your facilities. So think of like rent, for example, could fall under an indirect cost. Or as managing federal funds, it usually is needed to have an audit. And if you do receive an award over $750,000, or you have over $750,000 that come from federal funds, you are required to do a single audit every year. And so, whatever cost it might take to do that audit service can also fall under indirect cost. We do have some unallowable costs I want to uplift here, and just to kind of go through what some of those are. Federal funds cannot be used for things like lobbying, alcoholic beverages, other certain kinds of advertising costs, anything for personal use, if you have any bad debts or fines or penalties that must be paid, entertainment costs are all not allowed under federal grants. And if you want to dig into any of those, we've linked directly to the subpart for each of these individual pieces as well. Next slide. Fundraising cannot be directly attached to a federal grant. Anything that includes investment management or any interest that you might want to receive are also not allowed under federal grants. Next slide. And then for this particular program, there are also a couple of other things that are typically not able to be funded. And so equipment acquisition costs are not going to be allowed under this particular program. We do want to note that if you do need certain equipment to get work done, equipment rentals are allowable under this particular program. Indirect costs for this program is limited to the 10% de minimis rate unless you have a pre-approved negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, or a NICRA for short. You will likely know if your organization has a NICRA. If you have a NICRA for another federal agency, you are allowed to use that for this particular program. But again, if you don't already have an established NICRA, the indirect will be capped at 10%. We do have some organizations that have elected to waive the recovery of indirect costs. While that's not typically recommended, you're allowed to do that as well if you prefer. Infrastructure costs and construction are not permitted under this particular award. So we're not going to see, the building of new buildings, for example, under this particular program. And then under this program as well, tree removals are allowed, but only in certain cases. And so I wanted to uplift that for things like, if the trees are dead, if they're having a high risk to public safety, if the health of the entire urban forestry area is at risk, those type of tree removals are allowed. But I will encourage you to get in touch with our USDA program leads if you have questions on that. So Richna or Molly or Eric would definitely be able to help you navigate if you have questions about tree removals. Next slide. So next, we're just going to get folks a little bit of a screenshot about their budget spreadsheets, and we'll walk through kind of what they look like. And so for this particular program, we have this template. This is the summary page. So on this particular page, you'll see that there's only 2 cells that are light blue. And as you work through this entire spreadsheet, the only cells that need to be filled in are the cells that are light green. I'm sorry, not light blue, light green. And so the rest of the spreadsheet will automatically calculate as folks move through filling it out. So we'll show you a finished version of this page in just a little bit, but this is the initial page of this budget spreadsheet. If you could go to the next slide. So this is the personnel tab here. It's a little bit of information here. It's a little bit small, but as you can see, the information that we'll ask you to fill out is the information that is in the light green. And there's only a couple things there. So you would type in the position or the role maybe of the organization, or the position of the person who you're requesting funding for. You would write down what their role is, so what piece of information or what their job duty will be. Their name, you would type in their salary and their effort. And so for this particular example, we have in red 2 folks that might be working on this award. One person makes $125,000 a year, and they're spending about 5% of their time on this particular grant. And someone else makes $100,000 per year, and they're hired just to do this work. And so 100% of their time is going to be spent on this grant. There's quite a few other pieces of information here, and I want to uplift the importance of them. So when you get into our online portal, we'll ask you to enter in the number of hours worked and the cost per hour for each person who is managing funding. And so once you put in the salary and effort percentage, this spreadsheet will automatically figure out how many hours work that is per year on the basis of 2,080 hours per year, which is a regular full-time employee, and what the hourly rate will be if you don't know that information. At the bottom of this tab, you'll also see a place to put a cost of living adjustment. So we know that a lot of organizations plan for salary increases after a year or so of employment. And so there is a place here where you can factor that into this spreadsheet as well. So some folks will do the rate of 3%, and that example is here in this sheet as well. Next slide. Very similar. A lot of organizations have a particular fringe rate that they're using. And so most of this information in this tab will pull in from the tab before it. At the bottom of this tab, you'll see that there's a couple of spaces to enter in information that all go into the total fringe rate for your organization. So for example, a lot of organizations have a certain percentage that they pay for FICA or Medicare. Maybe you have unemployment, retirement contributions, for health insurance, and for workers' compensation. And so what you would do is put in whatever percentage your organization holds, and it'll automatically add up what the fringe benefit rate is for any staff person that you're requesting funding for under this particular project. Next slide. This tab here is for travel. So you'll be able to see that we have an example here. But if you are having staff travel, for example, out of state for maybe a urban forestry type conference, maybe you have people that are traveling via car, you can put in the federal reimbursement rate, which I believe right now is 56 cents per mile. And so you can enter all of that information in here. We just asked for a justification for what the travel is. Next slide. Supplies, we have the same type of information here as well. So you can enter in whatever supplies you might need to get this project done. You can see in this particular example, we highlighted walkie-talkies for a community volunteer event. And so those costs are in the first year because that's when you have to buy them. And then there's not any costs in year 2 and 3. Next slide. And then again, you have the contractual information. So you might have a contractor coming in who's doing tree planting or anything else like that. And so here is where you would put what the contractor is, what the justification is, and then you can break out the cost per year. Next slide. And then finally, you have the other direct cost category, which is very similar. You would enter in this information over the years. Next slide. And then finally, this is just an example of a budget spreadsheet that has been filled out with the information. And so you'll see on this front tab that this whole table is filled out with the information from the other tabs. Again, this information is automatically calculated once information is entered on the other tabs of this spreadsheet. And so all of it is here, and you can reference this as you move into the online platform. Next slide. The other thing that I did want to make sure that folks knew about is that we do ask for folks to provide a budget narrative with their budget as well. When you go into our online system to apply, there will be a text box where you can fill out your budget narrative. And so on this slide, we've just broken out a little bit of the information that we're looking to see as you describe what has gone into your budget. And so there's basically one bullet point for each tab in the budget spreadsheet, and a little bit of information about what we would expect to be described in those sections. So this one has personnel, fringe benefits, and travel. If you want to go to the next slide, supplies and contractual. I did want to note that for the contractual category, what we will ask for is if you already have quotes or you have estimates for any potential contractors, if you have those, you're welcome to submit them with your application. That way we can see how the costs were estimated. Next slide. And then again, we have the other category, or the indirect costs. And again, for the indirect costs, you're allowed to take the 10% de minimis, but as well, if you have a negotiated cost rate, you can enter that information as well. Go ahead. And next, we're going to go into entering your budget in Green Latinos grant making. So Caesar has gone ahead and recorded a video ahead of time to walk through the entering your budget in our Green Latinos grant making portal. So Caesar, if you can go ahead and play that video, that would be great.
Welcome to the budget portal instruction video. In this short video, we will go over how to enter your budget based on the Excel file you have developed for your project. And we will go over the categories to ensure correctness. In doing so, let's begin. Here, I just wanted to show you a quick example of the Excel file of what it should look like before entering information. All the tabs below go into the category specifically, which feed into the main one for budget summary. For the purposes of this video, we have a pre-filled budget. So we have something to show you in order to give you an idea of how to enter the information. Jumping into the sample budget, as you can see on the budget summary, we have some numbers filled out already in advance. Assuming that this would be your budget for your project, we're going to take these numbers and then we're going to upload them to the portal. Again, the portal has already been pre-filled with several categories in order to advance the progress of this example, but we have some callouts for you to understand where they come from. So let's start with personnel. The cells in yellow are the areas that we are going to call to attention to. So in the first example, for Susan Martinez and John Garcia, we noticed that Susan Martinez is making $100,000 a year at 25% effort. For this project in year one, she'll be making $25,000. So let's jump into the application portal and enter that right now. To begin, every time you enter a number for a budget line, you have to click Add Budget Line Item. This includes for personnel and for fringe, meaning that for each year, it has to be entered separately. In order to enter that, we'll go into budget category, personnel, and we're going to choose Susan for year one. In the following cells, we also need this following information: quantity and cost per unit, meaning how many hours per year will Susan Martinez participate in this project and at what rate? Well, the Excel file for your budget has already calculated that for you. So all you have to do is copy these two figures, 520 and 48.08, to calculate the total amount. So let's do that now. The total subtotal in this case would be 25,001.6. Now, due to the limitation of the decimal, of only having 2 decimal points, you might be a little bit off your exact total from your budget, and that's okay. The only call out here is that whatever subtotal you have here in the calculation at the top must match whatever you have on the bottom in order to save. So in this case, if we go back to the budget sample, we're entering a budget line for year one only. So let's do that right now. All the following cells, make sure they're pre-filled with zeros. Otherwise, you cannot save, as the asterisks point out information has to be included. Once that's done, click Save. To double check your work, you can expand this column, scroll to Personnel, and look for Susan Smith Year 1. Here we go. On this line item, we have Susan Martinez for year one. She is working 520 hours per year at the rate of 48.08 for a total of 25,160. Now, let's go on to the next example. We're missing information right now for John Garcia for year two. So let's jump into the application and add that now by clicking Add Budget Item, going to the budget category under Personnel, position name, in this case would be John Garcia, taking place in year two. Now let's go back and double check what the total hours per year, and the hourly rate will be. In this case, we've identified it to be 104 hours per year at $24.76. Giving us a total of 2,575. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. It's only off by 0.04 cents. Now, since the emphasis here is for year two, let's make sure we enter that in year two. So year one will be 0. Year two is going to be 2575.04. Year three is going to be 0, and year four is going to be 0. Make sure that this subtotal is equal to this subtotal, and you may save. To double check your work, expand the column, go under personnel, and we're going to double check for John Garcia year two, what we just entered, for 2575.04. So we did it correctly. Great. Now that we've completed our personnel budget line item, let's go into fringe. For fringe, we've noticed that Susan Martinez is missing for year two. So we're going to take the hourly rate and the hours and enter that now. So we go back to the portal, add a budget line item. This time in the drop-down menu, instead of personnel, we're going to go to fringe. We are going for Susan Martinez for year two. And we're just going to double check what those hours are, 520 and 1188. So we will enter 520, 1188, giving us a total of 6,177.6, which is close to 6,180. I know it's not as accurate as the Excel file, but due to limitations, we should be okay. Now, this is a focus for year two, as noted here above. So we're going to do 0, 6177.6, 0, and 0, and save. Now, once we go back to the budget, we've cleared the fringe. Now let's jump to travel. For travel, we've noted that there's going to be one travel event per year for 2 people, in this case for Susan and John. Each time to travel, it will cost $700. That means per year, they're budgeting $1,400, $1,400, and $1,400. But as you know, we have to enter a quantity. So let's take a step back and consider how many times are people traveling. Well, for year one, they'll be traveling twice. For year two, if you add 2 more, that's 4, plus year 3, it's a total of 6. So what we'll do is we'll multiply 6 travel opportunities times 700 to give us the subtotal. So now we go back to add budget line item. We're going to go to travel. We're going to add the one travel event for 2 people per year. We concluded that there's 6 opportunities to travel in total for the project at the cost of 700, which gives us a total of 4,200 for that budget line item. Fortunately for us, the amounts are evenly distributed years 1, 2, 3. So let's just enter those numbers now. And the last year as 0. Again, we double check that the subtotal at the top matches the one at the bottom. They're equal so that we can click and save. We can now go back to the budget line item in our Excel file and double check that our work is correct. And we can go on to the next tab. For supplies, we do not have an exact example. The only call out for this is that in total for this project, we are estimating to plant 300 trees. Remember that, we're going to use this for the next example. So here in the tree maintenance, we've noticed that we need to enter this budget line item. Here we've noted that the tree maintenance per tree is going to cost $300. As we know, if the trees are going to be planted 100 trees per year, we understand that the maintenance will vary. So for year one, there's going to be only 100 trees available to maintain, meaning 100 times 300 will give us 30,000. The following year, an additional 100 trees will be added. So in this case, there'll be 200 trees to be maintained at the cost of 300, giving us 60,000. And as we conclude the project at 300 times 300, 300 trees planted at the cost of 300 is going to give us 90,000. An alternative way to calculate this is taking the subtotal of $180,000 and dividing it per tree, which gives us 600 trees that we will have to maintain over the course of the project. So let's go back to the project portal and let's add that line item now. We go to add budget line item, go to budget category. We're going to go into contractual. We're going to go into the description, the tree maintenance company. We've concluded that there's going to be 600 trees overall maintained at the cost of $300, which gives us a total of $180,000. Now, if we go back to the budget, we understand that the distribution is going to be different year per year in the total amounts. The first year is going to be 30,000, the second year is going to be 60, and the third year is going to be 90. So let's enter that now. First year is going to be 30, second year is going to be 60, and the last year is going to be 90. And we enter a 0. We make sure that the subtotal at the top matches the one at the bottom. We can click and save. Now that we've entered all of the budget line items, we have the totals for year 1, year 2, and year 3. We can take the total of the project so far at 597, and we can double check our work by going back to the budget summary. By the total direct charges that we have accumulated, we have estimated to be 597,475. Which is 597,471, which as mentioned before, it will be off by a couple of dollars, but that's okay. So we can click and save now. This will take you to the next page of the indirect cost rate. Here you will enter your indirect cost rate and verify the total amount is correct. In the first cell, which you'll enter, is just a text. You'll literally copy the stuff, the line item here at the bottom, included the rate. In this case, because this example is based on a 10% rate, we're just entering verbatim 10% indirect cost rate. In the second cell, we're going to enter an integer only, and it will convert it to a percentage. Because we're working with 10%, we enter the integer 10. The total amount that it gives us is at 52,997. Now we can double check that work by going back to our budget line item. And if we look at our total indirect cost estimate is 52,997. So that matches and we're good to go. And we can click next. Now we've reached our final screen of our budget line items. We've seen our total amounts for each budget line item, including indirect, and the total line items and the totals per year. Now to verify our work is correct, we're going to look at the total here from our portal and compare it versus what we've budgeted in our Excel file. So our total is at 650,468, and our total here is 650,472, which is perfectly fine. Once we verify that, click Submit Budget, and you're good to go. Congratulations, you finished the submission of your budget.
Thank you, Caesar, for
Budget portal
together that video. We're going to walk really briefly through the reimbursement process for this grant. So if you are awarded, we want to be very transparent upfront about how our reimbursement process will work. Next slide. So because this is federal funding, unfortunately, that means that payments will not be able to be made upfront before the work gets started. We do have an opportunity to work with Raza Development Fund if you do need bridge funding to get started, and you'll hear about that just in a moment. And Sandy, I do see your question. We will make sure that that video gets uploaded so you can watch it again if you need support as you're going through. Um, all reimbursement requests will be submitted through our Green Latinos grant making portal, which we just showed you the brief introduction for in that video. With each reimbursement request, we will need folks to include the expenditures to match with your approved program budget. So as we make decisions on these awards, everyone will work with us to agree on a final budget, and those expenditures should match that throughout the project. We will also need invoice backup documentation when it comes to reimbursements. And so as we work through this, we will have a reimbursement process quarterly, and we will expect to see the backup documentation for those expenses every quarter. Next slide. And then finally, we did want to note that if you are approved for a grant, there are a couple of things that will hold up payments. So if there are late reports, that will hold up reimbursement. If you submit a reimbursement request after the deadline, that will hold up the time it takes to get the reimbursement. And then also, as I mentioned before, all of our grantees must keep an active SAM.gov registration throughout the period of the performance. And so if for some reason the SAM.gov registration is not current, it will hold up the reimbursement as well. Next slide. So some general tips again for the reimbursement process for our grantees. Just make sure that you're keeping timely reimbursement payments and all of the backup documentation that will be required. Next slide. Our team will review all of the expenses before we submit anything for payment. Obviously, it's great for your team to also review the expenses just to make sure everything's in line before it gets to us. Next slide. As I mentioned, we will have a quarterly reimbursement process. And so we have set dates for when the reimbursement reports will be due for this particular program. And so those are 410, 710, 1010, and 110 for all of these projects. Because of the start date of this particular program, it's very likely that the first reimbursement request will not take place until January at the earliest, and potentially even in April for this particular project as well. Next slide. And then finally, that payment will be processed within about 15 days of final approval on our end. And I want to note that the final approval on our end will not happen immediately. That will include us taking the time to review everything that has been submitted. So it's likely that final payment, once a reimbursement request is submitted, will take 3 to 4 weeks before it hits your bank account. Next slide. And so we are also going to share a couple of additional resources here. I know that Rich put in the chat already a link to where all of our videos will be uploaded. And so on that same page, you'll find all of the additional resources that we might be posting to go along with this particular request for proposals. So this is just a screenshot of what it looks like currently. Just know that this list will get longer as we provide more training, more resources, and more support for you all. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, if you go to the next slide, Caesar, and pass it over to Adrian to talk a little bit about Raza Development Fund. And they're on board and they can help out with bridge funding should folks need funding up front to get the project started.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. It's a pleasure to to see and meet all of you. My name is Adrian Reese, and I have the privilege of serving as Raza Development Fund's Chief Investment Officer. And Raza Development Fund, we are a national, Latino-led and focused community development financial institution. We have been around for approximately 25 years, give or take. And we have an intentional focus on serving the Latino community as well as other under-resourced communities, really, as the slide entails, to advance economic opportunity, social mobility, and racial justice. Next slide, please. Or am I able to control it? Okay. And really, the mission of our organization is to unleash the power, potential, and promise of the Latino and other under-resourced communities. And we've been engaged in this work for an extremely long time, and we've got an intentionality and focus on helping to provide access to capital, knowing that it's difficult for organizations, community-based organizations that are just don't have access to the primary financial markets that are out there. And that's the reason why CDFIs like Raza Development Fund exist, is to be able to provide that access to capital that so community-based organizations like you all operate and run have the ability to serve your community and provide access to opportunities of upward economic mobility. Next slide, please. Now, we've gone over the last 18 months or so, have been on this journey for a strategic planning and process, and really trying to hone in and identify what the key pillars are that we're going to focus in on as an organization for the upcoming 5 to 7 years. As an institution has been around for 25, it's important to be able to reestablish and making sure that the organization is on the track to achieve its North Star. And coincided with that is that we had 2 years ago, we welcomed a new chief executive officer after our longtime founder and legacy CEO retired. And what the results of that were really what it came down to was we're focusing on 3 specific goals, and that is to continue to do what we've been doing for the last 25 years, which is to expand access to education via our work throughout the entire K through 12 continuum, as well as working with post-secondary and early childhood, as well as workforce development, working with our FQHC partners in the healthcare industry, and also continue to provide lending to the affordable housing space. Some of the new initiatives that we're embarking on as well is to be able to increase to help build and uplift communities through generational wealth building. And we're doing that in two distinct ways, and that's continuing to support small businesses via our small business intermediary lending that we work with other CDFI and other nonprofit lender organizations that are out there that have a built-in small business infrastructure and network that have the folks who have the ability to create these social contracts with the local community that they serve, and having really a grassroots initiative and effort. Our capability here, our superpower, if you will, is to be able to provide access and increase liquidity that those organizations have the ability to continue to do the good work that they do. And as well as leaning into home ownership. We are a support corporation for Unidos US, which is some of you may be familiar with, largest Latino advocacy organization, civil rights organization in the country. We were founded as a support corporation for them 25 years ago. And they launched their home initiative, which is the Home Ownership Means Equity initiative, which is to trying to increase the number of Latino homeowners by 2030, increasing that by 4 million. And so we're looking at innovative and distinct ways, because we're not a mortgage lender, but there are unique ways in which we can provide access to capital that would help facilitate the creation of single-family homes and to be able to get more Latino families into home ownership. And then the last goal that we're focused on is really to uplift and build the capacity of the Unidos US affiliates, which is, there's about 300 or so nonprofit and community-based organizations that are part of the Unidos US network. And they span the gamut in terms of the industries in which we lend to, which is education, affordable housing, healthcare, small business, social entrepreneurship, immigration services, other social services that are there that support the Latino community. But also, we as an institution, one of the few Latino-led and focused CDFIs that are out there, we think that we provide a unique lens and voice to the CDFI space, and that there's a level of cultural competency that we bring to the table that we feel that we can help others learn to be able to better serve and better understand what the needs are of the Latino community, and leveraging the partnership that we have with Unidos US and really getting the grassroots intel that we have across the country by the vast network that is there. Next slide, please. And what do we do? And we do that, as a CDFI, our primary vehicle in doing that is providing access to capital. And so we utilize and leverage our different partners that are out there to mobilize responsible and attainable capital. And one of the new focus areas that we're leaning into as well is climate resilience. We know that there's an existential threat that's there, and we know that the Latino community and other minority communities are the ones who get hit hardest when it comes to natural disasters, heat waves, and the like. And so we're leaning into this initiative of being able to leverage resources that are out there to making sure that we're upskilling ourselves to be attuned to what the needs are and to provide innovative ways of how we can generate access to capital that folks can be able to utilize to implement their projects. Because we know that this is, it really, it's an esoteric type of industry right now. And I think a lot of folks are, especially in light of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund as part of the Inflation Reduction Act of the $27 billion that is coming out. Folks are still trying to rally and understand exactly what the restrictions are, but more importantly, how that money can be utilized to support community-based organizations and the projects to be able to create energy efficiency and as well as climate resiliency for the built environment, ultimately to help alleviate the stress that's being placed upon Latino and other under-resourced communities. And I think part of this as well is it's not just providing the capital, but providing support to organizations. And we work with organizations that span the gamut as far as the maturity cycle is concerned, whether that's early inception type of organizations that are very nascent or those that are very mature. And each of them have different and unique needs. And so when folks need a little bit more, folks who've never borrowed capital before, don't understand the lending process, we try to be very intentional about being explicit about what is needed, trying to provide resources when and where we can to be able to have them be lending prepared, ultimately, to be able to take on capital. Because one of the things that we've always espoused is that we're not a transactional organization. We're not in this just to make loans and just for the sake of making loans, but really to provide catalytic support, and ultimately to build relationships and be able to provide support that organizations need. Because we do no one any favors by providing them lending capital that they're just not prepared or they're ill-equipped to be able to take on. We want to make sure that any support that we provide is going to be additive to your organization and not ultimately dilutive. I think the important, one other important aspect here is, again, promoting climate resiliency and embedding clean energy projects, and greenhouse gas reduction tactics as part of our lending platform. That is something that, we have really leaned into over the last 18 to 24 months. And, we're eager to learn just aside you as organizations who are at the ground level or attuned to what the needs are and seeing how we can help and facilitate and support. Next slide, please. As well as, I think we talked about, some of the difference beyond not being transactional as an organization. And not to be repetitive here, but I think the power of leveraging with the Unidos US relationship that is there, and they too themselves are very leaning heavily into the climate resiliency initiatives and helping facilitate their own network of organizations to be to incorporate energy efficiency into the community-based organizations and the projects and their facilities that they develop. But making sure that we're deploying capital in a very responsive way. We don't just have products that we just bring off the shelf and just say you either fit in this box or you don't. We try to be as a non-regulated specialty finance company, which CDFIs are. We're not bound to the same restrictions that you have at your JP Morgans, your Wells Fargos that are heavily regulated. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have credit and underwriting policies. As a matter of fact, we do. We adhere to fundamental credit and underwriting policies to make sure that we're making sound investment decisions. But ultimately, I think the superpower that we bring is that we can be flexible, we can be innovative, we can be creative with the financing structures that we can bring to the table that ultimately is going to be responsive to the needs that you all have. And that's one of the conversations that we've had with Green Latinos is, they came to us and saying, hey, there's these organizations, we've got a grant. There may be the potential need, given that this capital is going to be delivered, this grant capital is going to be delivered on a reimbursement basis, that the organizations may not necessarily have the resources and liquidity available to implement the projects, and they may need some bridge financing. And so, this is something that is not new to our organization. That's something that we do quite consistently and quite frequently. And, we're always looking for ways of how we can become more and more efficient in how we do that. And so, we're excited about the partnership with Green Latinos and helping to support your all and your all's journeys as you incorporate climate resiliency and helping to serve the Latino community. Next slide, please. And so just as, just a couple of facts and figures, again, we've been around for 25 years. We have invested over $1.5 billion since that time, and we've leveraged that to the tune of other capital that has been brought into these projects to the tune of $6 billion. We are a national organization, as I mentioned. We're headquartered here in Phoenix. We've got folks, because of the pandemic, a lot of our investment team is now spread out across the country, but we have made investments in 38 states, including Puerto Rico. Next slide. And what we've done with that capital is that we've been able to support the creation of 67,000 high-quality educational seats across the various continuum of education. We've been able to support the creation and facilitation of 19,000 affordable housing units, and so any of those units are restricted to, as well as home ownership, to individuals and families making it the 120% AMI level or below. And we've worked with 26 community healthcare centers, and as well as those institutions serving 323,000 new patients that have been created by the projects that we've funded. And so we're eager to walk along this journey with you all. We're eager to learn, and we're super excited to figure out ways that we can partner and support your all's organizations and to be helpful in any way that we can. We're not here to sell anything. We're a nonprofit organization that it has been in operation for a long time, and we really just want to be additive partners here. And so if there's a way in which we can help, we are more than and welcome and willing to engage in a conversation with you to see how we might be able to do that.
Thank you so much. I think we can go to the next slide, Caesar. And yes, if there are any nonprofits on this call or that see this after the fact that are interested in getting support, we can definitely facilitate that conversation as well. And we're really excited to potentially partner with you all as well. So as we get ready to wrap up this presentation, just a reminder from Green Latinos that we're here to help anybody who is interested in applying for this program to be successful in their application and to managing funding. Our major goal right now is to make sure that this $8.5 million gets out the door to all of the great work that community-based organizations are doing in our selected states and territories. And so we're here to help. And at this point, we can answer any other questions that folks might have. You're welcome to raise your hand. This is also a small group, so if you have a question and you want to come off mute, you could also do that as well. And I'm going to put my email in the chat. I would encourage Caesar and Rich and her team also to maybe do that. That way folks have our emails if they have any other questions as well. Go ahead, Sandy.
And I'm wondering if it's better if I just send you an email with the questions. Would that be a lot easier than to ramble on with questions?
It is totally up to you. If you feel like it's a short question that we can answer, definitely feel free to ask it. If you would like to follow up, we can also set up another time to chat as well.
Okay, because we are a conservation corps.
Okay.
And so our funding, we provide with all our young people who are involved in our conservation work, we have two ways how we do it. One is we do either direct salary where they get minimum wage. The other way we do it is we have a kind of a loaded rate that incorporates all the expenses for running a corps. So I guess that's why I'm saying I wonder if I should just send you an email to see what's acceptable. A direct a direct rate where you're charging the minimum wage and the salaries and the benefits for the Corps members? Or is it a loaded rate? I know sometimes like the Forest Service will accept a loaded rate, which includes, you know, workers' comp and the trucks and all the stuff included in there. So just one big rate. But then, for example, state agencies don't, you know, like CAL FIRE is like, oh no, we want you to break it down to every penny. So I guess that's my first question.
Yeah, so we could function under either one of those. My big piece of advice is that if you're going to provide a loaded rate for all of the work that's happening and all of the pieces that go into that, we will need to know what, you know, like each individual piece of that rate is to be able to get approval from USDA for that. And so if you do choose the loaded rate, we will need to see a breakdown basically of like, you know, what individual pieces go into that rate. And so it sounds like maybe you have that information available already for some of your other funders, but we do need to just kind of see what the breakout is of whatever goes into that full loaded rate.
Okay, would it make more sense if I just send you that? Because I've had to deal with that issue with the Forest Service, with CAL FIRE, with the Bureau of Land Management, and I found that sometimes it's best to break it down, like just say, you know, the Corps member wages, the Corps member benefits, the supplies and all. But so that's why I'll send you an email on that one, because we're fine either way. We're fine either way. The youth work either way. But sometimes, you know, the loaded rate, the loaded Corps member rate, which is a practice in California for the certified conservation corps tend to use. Because then it also includes the supervisor that's supervising the youth as well. So yeah, that would be my I guess the question that I would, in order to build the budget. By the way, the video was awesome. Thank you. So I'll send you a follow-up question on that. So
Yeah, that would be great. And like I said, if you have examples you want to throw into that email, I can take a look. And if I need to loop in even our federal program officer just to get their thoughts, we can do that as well. That way we're not leading you down the wrong path, because I know it takes a long time to put this information together. So we want to make sure we set you up for success from the beginning.
all right, thank you.
Of course. Is there anyone else on the call that has questions? Sandy, go ahead.
So I'm sorry, as I'm saying, so no equipment is allowable for this. So
Unfortunately, yes, no equipment is allowable under this particular program.
okay, and then the tree removal issue, you know, that's not allowable either.
There are cases where tree removal will be acceptable under the program. However, you know, it shouldn't be the majority of the costs, I would say, for a particular project. And Richna, our program director, can definitely help if you do have tree removals in kind of what level will be accepted by USDA under this particular program.
Okay, because in California, what's happening is some of the palm trees are being removed and they're being brought in with more fire-resistant trees. Because the palm tree doesn't necessarily do much other than look like a palm tree. And so a number of cities are hiring the Corps to come in and remove the palm trees and put in more fire-resistant trees, especially the cities that are near the national forest. So we have been removing them, but only to replace them with fire-resistant trees. So I'm just
So, Sandy, I can help answer that. What we are trying to avoid is a proposal that's focused entirely on tree removals or largely on tree removals. So we want a proposal that really focuses on tree planting and maintenance or urban forestry workforce development, restoration, and resilience. So if folks are looking to use this proposal to just remove trees, this is not the right proposal. We would consider tree removals as part of an overall larger scope of work. So if there are hazard trees that you need to address in this process of restoration and resilience in your communities, where you have HLB that you're trying to address in California, you've got some invasive diseases and invasive pests. I completely understand that it may be a small component of the larger scope of tree planting maintenance and urban forestry workforce development. I think in those cases, we might be willing to oblige that. It's just that we cannot oblige proposals where it's solely about removing trees.
Yeah, no,
So we'll definitely be willing to work with you offline and help you as you are putting your proposal together to clarify allowable and unallowable costs and what's reasonable. We're more than happy to work with you on that.
And the tree removal that I brought up is just like a small component to workforce development that we
Correct.
do with cities. So it's not like removing trees. It's just that the public works director now wants to show our youth how to do this and how to do that, and so they can get them employed. But it's not like we sit there and remove a bunch of trees. So thank you.
And in that case, it falls under the scope of the curriculum, the practical curriculum for the Urban Forestry Workforce Development Program is what you're describing. So that's fine.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. Juan, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. I just want to ask because urban places on Puerto Rico are very tropical and they overgrow very easily. And we are focusing on planting trees a couple of years ago, but we also want to focus on give maintenance to the already grown trees where we plant nearby. We want to give some kind of pruning, maintaining the 33% of pruning on each action. So that action can be considered on the proposal, the pruning
Yes.
for trees that have been
Yes.
already grown there.
Yes, because it's establishment of trees and saplings that you've recently planted. And in order to address or expand the canopy where you've planted these trees, you've got to focus on pruning and other maintenance features for making sure that that tree grows to maturity. So definitely.
Yeah, but to making sure just the pruning of the nearby trees, not the planting trees.
It cannot just be about pruning of the trees. It has to be like pruning has to be a portion of your overall scope of work. Does that make sense, Juan? So if your scope of work is about planting trees, maintaining trees, and a component of pruning is a part of that maintenance, that's fine, but it cannot just be a proposal about pruning trees. You see what I mean?
It's about planting, but
It's about
when we impact the some areas on green areas of over urban places, there's a lack of maintenance of already grown trees. Like for example, 20 years old tree have been grown there and it has green spaces nearby, but it'll be nice to give them a nice pruning. That way their canopy can be healthy and then continue planting on next to them. That's what I mean.
Those are allowable costs. Yes.
Perfect. Nice.
Yes. Do we have any other questions? So as you put your projects together, if you run into these issues where you need clarification about what's an allowable cost or not an allowable cost, we've all put our emails in the chat for you to be able to reach out to us and ask us any questions at any time. We want to make sure that this is an easy process for you to be able to ask questions, get answers, and submit a comprehensive application for this program. So we look forward to receiving your applications. We're here to help you as you need us. And we wish you all the best in this process. And with that, I guess we can end this presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.